This is the BBC World Service, and on our website you can explore more of our programmes, from documentaries to science. Listen and download at any time by going to bbcworldservice.com. On air, online and on smartphones, this is the BBC World Service, the world's radio station.
Welcome to Newshour from the BBC. This is Andrew Peach in London. President Volodymyr Zelensky says Ukraine will never bow to ultimatums from Russia and surrender its cities. In Mariupol, at least 3,000 people have died, with many more bodies in mass graves or under buildings. We'll hear a first-hand account.
There will be no burials during the fighting. That is what the police said to us when we saw them on the street and asked them what to do with our friend's dead grandmother. They advised us to put her body on the balcony.
In Kiev, 8 people were killed when a missile struck a shopping centre. Our correspondent has been to the scene. And war poetry dates back to the ancient Greeks. But in this war, poems can be shared within days.
Some describe what's going on with people who are refugees, who have become homeless, whose life plans were broken.
All of that on the way in Newshour from the BBC.
Hello, this is the BBC News with Fiona MacDonald. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has said his country will never bow to ultimatums from Russia to surrender its biggest cities. Kiev refused an offer of what Moscow termed safe passage for those in Mariupol if they laid down their arms. Mr. Zelensky said Ukrainians would have to approve any compromise agreed with Russia. Local commanders said the death toll in Mariupol now exceeded 3,000. Some of its people have managed to escape to cities, including Dnipro. The BBC's Wira Davis is there.
The city of Mariupol is in ruins, with barely a building left unscathed by Russian shelling. But a Russian-imposed deadline for Mariupol's defenders to surrender was ignored, so the shelling continued. Some residents remain in makeshift shelters. Others fled north to cities including Dnipro, where there is help awaiting. Some of these people will stay in Dnipro. For others, it's the start of a long journey. As they escaped Mariupol, some were told by Russian soldiers to keep going, as this city too would soon be under attack.
Efforts to get humanitarian aid through to 300,000 people trapped in Mariupol have again failed. The first international journalists have visited its Russian-controlled areas. The Reuters news agency describes it as an apocalyptic wasteland where apartment blocks are all charred black. Bodies are being buried by the roadside as families emerge from days and nights sheltering underground. A Ukrainian survivor of the Nazi Holocaust has been killed in a Russian attack on the city of Kharkiv. Relatives of Boris Romanchenko said that he died during Russian bombing of his apartment block on Friday. The 96-year-old was rounded up by Nazi troops after the invasion of the Soviet Union and was sent to concentration camps, including Bergen, Belsen and Buchenwald. Russia has summoned the US ambassador to protest about statements by President Biden, who recently labelled President Putin a war criminal over the conflict in Ukraine. Russia's foreign ministry said recent statements were unworthy of a statesman and pushed Russian-American relations to breaking point. Mr. Biden's been discussing what the White House called Russia's brutal tactics in Ukraine with the leaders of Germany, Britain, France and Italy. In other news, Washington has declared that the Burmese military's violence against the Rohingya minority amounted to crimes against humanity and genocide. Neda Tawfiq reports.
The minority group have long been denied citizenship in Myanmar. In 2017, the military junta forced at least 730,000 Rohingya from their homes and into neighboring Bangladesh. In response, a UN fact-finding mission said top military figures must be investigated for genocide. Their report accused them of the gravest crimes, including murder, enslavement, gang-raping women, assaulting children, and burning entire villages.
BBC News. The US has slapped sanctions on an elite police division accused of violence against protesters in Sudan. The sanctions freeze any US assets held by members of the unit and bar Americans from dealing with them. Our Africa editor Mary Harper reports.
The US Treasury Department said the Central Reserve Police have been at the forefront of what it described as the violent response towards protesters. It said they'd used excessive force, including including live ammunition. Nearly 90 demonstrators have been killed since an army takeover last October. The police unit was deployed during the long war in Sudan's western region of Darfur, in which 1/3 people were killed.
The U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee is beginning 4 days of hearings on the nomination of the first black woman to the Supreme Court. Ketanji Brown Jackson was nominated by President Biden after Justice Stephen Breyer announced his retirement in January. In congratulating Judge Jackson, the Democratic Senator Patrick Leahy said her nomination was an indication of how much more inclusive America had become.
Despite all the darkness in the world, the political brinksmanship has unfortunately become a hallmark of Congress in recent years. Your nomination actually fills me with hope. Hope for the court, hope for the rule of law, hope for the country.
A UN Special Rapporteur on North Korea said the country's extreme isolation as a result of the COVID pandemic has worsened its already dire human rights record. Tomás Ojea Quintana said Pyongyang had imposed draconian new laws during its self-imposed coronavirus blockade, while most diplomats had left the country. Mr. Ojea urged Pyongyang to reopen its borders to aid workers. BBC News.
This is Andrew Peach in London with Newshour from the BBC World Service. In Ukraine, President Vladimir Zelensky has said his country will never bow to ultimatums from Russia or surrender its biggest cities. His government had earlier refused an offer of safe passage for those in the besieged southern city of Mariupol if they laid down their arms. Mr. Zelensky said Russia's demand was unacceptable and the only way for Moscow to achieve its goal was to wipe out every Ukrainian citizen.
Ultimatums will not be fulfilled by Ukraine. We just cannot execute it physically. We have lost people, our people. How can we do it? All of us must be destroyed, then their ultimatum will be automatically executed.
The authorities in Mariupol say the death toll in the city now exceeds 3,000 people. In fact, it's really expected to exceed that by many thousands because many people are buried in mass graves or under the rubble of destroyed buildings. Efforts to get humanitarian aid through to an estimated 300,000 people still trapped in Mariupol continue to be thwarted. An advisor to the president of Ukraine, Alexander Rodnyansky, told Newshour the blame for this humanitarian crisis in the city lay wholly at Moscow's feet.
We tried to allow passage for civilians many times, and the Russians have been shooting down on these corridors. They've been killing people, killing civilians indiscriminately. It's them who are sabotaging any effort to rescue any civilian population. Now, as far as giving up, obviously we're not going to give up. This is our land, our territory, our cities. We're not just going to, give them to anybody like that.
The official Russian position on exactly what's happening in Mariupol runs counter to the information reported by the international media. But it is important to hear it nonetheless. Sergei Markov is a former spokesperson for President Putin and now Professor of Public Policy at Moscow State University. He's been talking to my colleague Sarah Montague.
What's happening in Mariupol is a huge humanitarian tragedy. And I know very well that more than 90% of the population of Mariupol, they are ethnically Russians and they are pro-Russian for sure.
The humanitarian tragedy is caused by Russia bombing the city.
No, humanitarian tragedy has main reason that neo-Nazi platoon Azov use terroristic methods and use these thousand pro-Russian people of Mariupol as human shield.
Mr. Markov, do you honestly believe that the Azov battalion, who are defending the city, are holding the civilians hostages despite all the evidence from those who have been able to get out?
We have plenty of evidence that neo-Nazi from Azov, who is the center of defenders of Mariupol, they doesn't want to allow civilians to leave the city. And only when Russian army took control over the suburb of Mariupol, dozens of thousands of civilians of Mariupol got chance to save their life.
Mr. Markov, it's the Russians who are bombing and shelling the humanitarian corridors when people are trying to leave.
It's 100% fake. Civilians from Mariupol who is leaving the city, they are 90% from Russians. They are 95% Russian speaking, and they regarded by Russian army as own people.
Okay, Markov. Our chief international correspondent is Lise Doucette. She's in Kiev. But what's she hearing from the southern port city of Mariupol?
Well, the accounts that have been given by those who have been fortunate to escape from this bombardment, this besieged city, do tell a very different story. They're not asked specifically about the Azov battalion, but they are asked about the Russian shelling and about life underground, and their accounts are absolutely heartrending about the kind of pain and fear they had to suffer while living for weeks in basement shelters without much food, without any water, without any heating. I was looking at an account from one of the residents of Mariupol, Nazhda Sukurokova, who has been posting accounts on Facebook, and one of them, and I'll read it, a neighbor said that God left Mariupol. He was afraid of everything he saw. For 20 days, she says, I was dying with my city. I was in hell. You're hearing various versions of a living hell, hell on earth, a city wiped off the map by so many of the survivors who, of course, just have to look up into the sky and look all around them and see the Russian shelling and bombardment. Obviously, this is a war, so the Ukrainians are firing back, and we do know that in Mariupol, there is the Ukrainian army units and there is the Azov battalions. They are meant to be integrated into the Ukrainian army, but we do have reports that sometimes they do act independently.
I'm seeing reports that can't be verified that tens of thousands of people potentially are being forcibly removed from Mariupol and taken to Russia.
Yes, so there's been a report on the TASS news agency that 62,000 people left Mariupol and traveled east into Russia. Now, we have no way of verifying if those people went voluntarily. What we do know is that days ago, officials in the city said that people were being forcibly removed from basement shelters. They mentioned a large sports arena where a large number of people had been taking cover. They said that they had been forced to leave. The New York Times spoke to people in the city and said the residents they spoke to confirmed those accounts, that they knew neighbors and friends who had also been forced to leave under those circumstances. But we have heard during this deepening crisis, the Russians saying that people have asked to come. That this is misery upon misery, that if there are people who have been forced to leave and then will be forced to go on Russian media and express gratitude to the same people who were shelling the city, that they had now been rescued by them.
Our chief international correspondent, Lise Doucette. Now, one of the places in Kiev that's been damaged was a shopping centre, damaged overnight by a Russian missile. Our international correspondent, Ola Guerin, has been there.
Stretching out in front of me, there is immense destruction. There's a fire truck still here at the scene, and police and army picking their way through the rubble. There are smashed cars, burnt out vans, huge amounts of twisted metal and concrete. And there's a multi-story building which has basically been shredded. It's charred, the glass blown out. This was a major shopping centre complex, and it's surrounded by blocks of flats. With me now is Tanya, who lives in one of the blocks nearby and heard the explosion last night. How are you feeling about the future here now in Kyiv?
I don't know now, but I don't want to leave Kyiv.
You want to stay?
Yeah, it's my home.
Even though things are so dangerous now?
I know, but dangerous all Ukraine.
There are indications that the Ukrainian military had a presence at the shopping centre. That may be why it was hit. But Russia has not hesitated to strike civilian targets in Kyiv and elsewhere. The capital may be facing a war of attrition. UK defence officials expect Russia to try to encircle the city in the coming weeks.
Garen in Kyiv. Now, although the southern port of Mariupol lies at the very centre of the conflict right now, it's hard to know exactly what's happening there. It's too dangerous for journalists to operate, so any information we have can't be independently verified. This is one account of what it's been like there in recent days. It was posted on Sunday on Facebook by Nadja Sokorokova, who lives in the city but has now left and made her way elsewhere. Her words have been voiced by one of the Newshour team.
I go out on the street during the breaks between the bombing. I need to walk the dog. She is constantly sneezing, shaking, and hiding behind my legs. I constantly want to sleep. My yard is quiet and dead, but I'm no longer afraid to look around. Opposite is the entrance to building number 150. The flames have devoured 5 floors there and are slowly devouring the 6th. The fire in one room is burning neatly, like in a fireplace. Windows are black and without glass. Curtains are wafting out of them, like tongues. I look at this calmly and feel cursed. I'm sure I'm going to die soon, in a matter of days. In this city, everyone is constantly waiting for death. I just wish death wasn't so frightening. 3 days ago, a friend of my oldest nephew visited us and told us that there was a direct hit on a fire department building. The rescuers there lost their lives. One woman's hand, leg, and head were blown off. I dream of my body parts staying in place, even after a bomb blast. I don't know why, but I think this is important. On the other hand, there will be no burials during the fighting. That is what the police said to us when we saw them on the street and asked them what to do with our friend's dead grandmother. They advised us to put her body on the balcony. I wonder how many balconies have dead bodies on them. Our apartment building on Mira Avenue is the only one not to have suffered a direct hit. It was indirectly damaged by shells twice. Glass windows were blown out in some apartments, but the building's hardly damaged and has been lucky compared to other buildings. The whole yard is covered with layers of ash, glass, plastic, and metal. I try not to look at the piece of iron embedded in the playground. I think it's a rocket. In the 3rd floor window, I see someone's face. It turns out that I'm afraid of living people. My dog is starting to howl, and I understand they're going to start shooting again now. I go outside during the day, and there's a cemetery-like silence around me. There are no cars, no voices, no children, no grandmothers on the benches. Even the wind is dead. A few people are here, though. They are lying dead at the side of the building and in the car park. I don't want to look at them. I'm afraid I'll see someone I know. All life in my city now exists in the basements. I try to cry, but I can't. I feel sorry for myself, my family, my husband, my neighbours, and friends. I go back to the basement. It's been 2 weeks, and I can't believe there was once another life. People continue to live in the basements in Mariupol. Every day, it's harder for them to survive. They have no water, food, light. They can't even go outside because of the constant shelling. Mariupol residents must live. Help them out. Let everyone know that the killing of peaceful people is continuing.
Powerful words posted on Facebook by Nadja, who was in Mariupol a couple of days ago and has now fled the city. This is Newshour. And coming up, we hear from the first person in the world to be successfully cured of COVID by a COVID vaccine.
It slowly became my prison cell, especially when it got to the summertime and the restrictions were lifting. You know, you could see family and friends starting to get back to a real life and do things, go on holidays, and I was still getting these positive results.
Our headlines. President Vladimir Zelensky has said Ukraine will never bow to ultimatums from Russia and surrender its biggest cities. As fighting continues for Mariupol, he said Ukraine would never accept Russian occupation. And the Foreign Ministry in Moscow has summoned the US ambassador and warned that relations with Washington are on the verge of rupture. There's more online at bbc.com/news. This is Andrew Peach in London with Newshour live from the BBC. Let's go back to Kiev now, the Ukrainian capital. The mayor there has announced a new curfew in the city, which is in place until Wednesday. Many thousands have left, but one person who's still there is Dr. Alexander Statkhovsky, who's a surgeon at Ukraine's National Cancer Institute. Alexander is still treating his patients, but also broadening his medical expertise in case he needs to care for people injured in battle. So how's today been for him?
The day was relatively without any bombing and shelling the whole day, but we had a couple of bombs which came at night, and they ruined part of our big supermarket. I mean, it's not a supermarket, it's a huge super mall. So people were pretty stressful because it was a collateral damage for some civilian buildings next to it. And we are having this commandant hour for tomorrow, so people will be locked in the residences, in their work. I would say at hospital because for the whole day, because tomorrow we are not supposed to move.
Give me a sense of what it's like in your hospital. You're a cancer doctor working in the middle of all of this in Kiev with patients to take care of. Inside the hospital, does it feel like it does any other time, or does it feel very different?
We feel definitely safer in hospital because we believe no one will bomb or shell the hospital. But since we know stories from Mariupol or Kharkiv, nobody cares about Red Cross or stuff, and those bombs go into hospitals, into maternity care centers. We see that it's not that much safe to stay in the hospitals. It's just the issue that when you are in hospitals with your colleagues, at least you are distracted from the situation. You have patients to consult. I do lots of online consultations, telemedicine. I'm going to operation room tomorrow for a cancer patient who needs my help. So at least we do something. We believe we are helping someone. We know that we are here to protect. We are here to help our military, our soldiers, if there will be some battlefield injured or some wounded soldiers, which may come to us. So it will be our second option, and we are also caring about our cancer patients who stayed within Kiev.
And for those who've chosen to stay, or perhaps were forced to stay, are you looking after them as patients in the same way as would normally happen with chemotherapy treatment and surgery and those kind of things?
We are doing chemo in more simpler regimens, for sure, for those who stay, because we are not using those toxic ones which may need some extra facilities, or we try not to do very, very serious surgeries that may, those patients may stay for 3-4 weeks because of some complications. So we are trying not to avoid those surgeries, and basically we send all those hard, tough patients, the complex patients already from Kiev.
Do you have enough supplies?
We already ordered a lot, and we are promised to receive a lot. It's just the issue that, there are lots of humanitarian right now which is coming into cities for this battle trauma. So for cancer patients, we have enough stuff because we have, lots of patients left, and we have some remaining medications and remaining devices in the hospital.
Have you thought about leaving? Because you're talking about the majority of the sort of patients you would look after now being elsewhere in the country and I guess needing the help of doctors like yourself. So have you thought of moving yourself to Western Ukraine or somewhere that's a bit safer?
I definitely will maybe more useful in Western part, but I know I have a number of colleagues from my institutions, from other hospitals that already moved to Western Ukraine. They are doing surgeries there, for example. But you understand that there are local doctors also in Western Ukraine. So it will be overflowed of patients. It will be overflowed of doctors. You never know what will happen tomorrow. Definitely, if Russians will come in the city, I will be thinking about moving faster. But so far, it's our city. I believe that my stay here is for my patients and for people who are around me, like my friends who are with weapons, with the local, military defense units. So by being here, you are kind of communicating with the network of people around you, and they see that you stay here, so they will stay here.
Dr. Alexander Stakhovsky, who's in Kiev. In peaceful times, the beautiful centre of Odessa, a city founded in the late 18th century by the Russian Empress Catherine the Great and France's Duc de Richelieu, is bustling with people and noise. Today, the silence of the city is broken by a loudspeaker blasting out from Odessa's famous funicular lift running alongside the Potemkin steps leading to the city centre. Warning, alert, stay safe, it says. The war is inching closer to Odessa by the day. Hannah Shelest is editor-in-chief of Ukraine Analytica. She's in Odessa, and she told me what's been happening there today.
Yes, this morning it's been shelling by the Navy artillery from the Russian ships, and the fact that that's been the first ship's artillery against Odessa since the Second World War. We previously experienced missile attacks at the suburbs, but not something with the use of the Navy. And that destroyed a few houses at the suburbs and definitely brought a little bit of panic in that district because of this situation. Still, we cannot say that that's been heavy shelling or something like this comparing to other towns around the country.
I mean, I'm guessing people in Odessa must have been preparing themselves for this moment. They must have been expecting this to come.
We haven't been relaxed for these 3 weeks at all because daily we hear sirens of the air defense and the work of the air defense because we've experienced quite a number of military drones coming to the town each day. There have been incidents and they've been shelling at the villages nearby. So I can't say that the city being not prepared. The Navy and the coastal artillery and air defense forces are constantly on high alert. That's for sure. But, the feelings are definitely different when it is coming closer and closer.
There are many reasons why Odessa is so significant. Let's talk about it from a sort of military perspective first of all. It's a huge port on the Black Sea, and that's fundamentally why it's going to be so important for Russia to want to take it.
That is exactly, that is the biggest seaport in Ukraine and one of the biggest in the Black Sea. But you also need to understand that when we speak about ports, we're talking about so-called big Odessa. That is three biggest seaports, one from another 30 kilometers. That definitely creates the conglomerate that perform, let's say, approximately 60-70% of the Ukrainian export. So that's very important both for the economic situation, but also for the security, because Odessa is the base for the Ukrainian Navy after the annexation of Crimea in 2014. And we are also access to Transnistria, the separatist region of Moldova controlled by the Russian Federation. So that's why Odessa region is important both as the route to Moldova and as the coastal protection of what can be here.
That's the practicality of it, for want of a better word. But for many of us outside Ukraine, Odessa is associated with amazing 19th century architecture, or the opera, or the ballet, the arts, all sorts of things that are based there.
If honestly, that is the downtown, and one of the main hope of the locals that Russians will think twice about shelling us with the heavy missiles, as what you saw in Kharkiv or in Mariupol, because definitely Kharkiv didn't have any emotional connection to the Russian Federation, and they needed to punish it after the January protests. But Odessa have these flair and memory and pictures that international community knew and so many times, but also for the Russians, because that being the third city in the Russian Empire, and before 2014 Russians used to spend their holidays here. You can find it in movies and in different cultural, like in books and everywhere. So honestly, we are really hoping that probably they will think twice before heavy shelling, because they don't want these pictures to be in the international news. That immediately will touch the hearts not only of the international community, but of the Russians themselves.
Hannah Shelest, the editor-in-chief of Ukraine Analytica, with me from Odessa.
This is the BBC World Service with